Trying to have a zen moment here to come back to the channel.
Coming back to the channel.
Oh my goodness.
It's been a minute.
It's been a minute.
Been a minute.
And you know what? After being gone from the channel since February,
Yeah.
I must say, audiophiles never disappoint. Y'all deliver every time. Every time. Favorites like, you need SUPERWAX in your brain to pay 10,000 USD for these, LOL. Nice commercial, says another guy. You know, just the
usual.
The usual.
Yeah.
The usual.
Yeah.
Test something cheaper, you know, which would be, when you did, would be followed by, all you do is talk about cheap things or look at something better, you know.
Can't please everybody.
Can't please anyone. Anyone. Anyway, I thought we could start this whole Unplugged series.
Mm-hmm.
No idea what episode we're on.
No idea.
No idea. Maybe someone else can tell me down in the comments. I'm going to have to go look it up later. I have literally no idea. But I thought we could start by listening to a couple of actual owners of this product. Josh O.
Okay.
Josh O C73, who's an owner, says, I've owned these for a few months now, and I'm very happy with them. I have two systems, the Pitt Giblin SUPERWAX Minis, which I use with my Lumen streamer.
Okay.
My other system is a Lumen U2 streamer, Weiss DAC 204, a Parasound amp, and PMC floor standards, all hooked up with very good cables. Okay. That system is well over 40 grand. And I can say that, in my opinion, the SUPERWAX Minis are about on par as far as sound quality goes. The expensive system edges them out a bit with its finesse, separation, and accuracy, but the minis have all that bass and seemingly endless dynamic capability, as well as a massive sweet spot with controlled directivity.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better myself. 100% agree with that, listener.
Yeah, Josh Host did put it into very fine words, if I don't say so myself. They might have said it better than you.
Maybe.
Let us know down below.
Yeah.
If Josh should start his own channel, come on board.
Come on board.
Stephen Jones says that they picked up a pair of these after first seeing them at an Aussie HiFi show.
Oh, okay.
They ended a long search for something that could integrate into my home theater setup, do music well, and have a high wife acceptance factor. The fit and finish of the speaker and the workmanship that have gone into the waveguide are first rate. Andrew is much better at describing the sound than I could ever be, but I agree with everything that has been said. For anyone taken aback by the user experience with the remote, I don't use it. For TV movie duties, the TV's remote controls everything via CEC.
Yep.
And our main source for music is an Inuus Zen Mini.
Oh, okay. Inuos.
Did I say that wrong?
I don't know. Maybe I'm saying it wrong.
Who knows? Know. Anyway, which has its own app and can do Spotify and Tidal Connect. After a couple of years of use, I still love them and would recommend them to anyone who is considering them after this review.
Again, maybe I didn't make a big enough point about that. Yes, the included remote is terrible. I hate it. And guess what? Pitt and Giblin also don't like it, but it is what it is. But I guess I should have been more clear that while the included remote is garbage, you can operate this thing using apps from, if you have a WIM streamer, an Eversolo like I do, or any kind of streamer that may have app functionality. You can control them that way. You can also use CEC if that device has HDMI. So honestly, for a lot of stuff, when it was connected to our Eversolo, I set the volume of the speakers themselves using the included remote, and then did the adjustments using the Apple TV remote, which controlled the Eversolo, for turning things down and up. And once I got that, like, the remote becomes a non-issue, because now I'm interacting with the speakers just as I would any other powered speaker. So to that is to this product's credit. It's just I have to point out what you're given in the crates because not everyone is going to enjoy or use the same electronics. And if you want to rely on what you've paid for without any extra ancillary stuff or too much ancillary stuff, then yes, you have to use the HyPEX remote, which is kind of cheap, directional, and slow.
Well, I want to move on to the Miro Labs comment. The Miro Lab is one of our members, by the way. They say, you make it sound like it's a sin to use the analog inputs of a DSP-based speaker. I was worried too before I purchased my Atom S-Series studio monitors. I've pitted them against several all-analog powered and unpowered monitors and prefer them for their resolution, clarity, and transient response. You seem to suggest that one cannot discern the quality of a different DAC with a digital speaker. I assure you that I can, and I do hear the differences between different DACs using the analog inputs of my Atoms.
Okay. I don't know the Atoms specifically that you're speaking about. I do not have a lot of experience with their products, so I'm going to have to take your word for it. It's not that it's a sin or that you can't or you shouldn't use analog inputs on a speaker that gives you analog inputs. I use them. And as I said in the review, I couldn't really discern that big of a difference when having two sets of digital to analog conversion happening in the signal chain versus one had I bypassed the Eversolo. So to each their own. Maybe that's a comment more about the Eversolo's quality compared to maybe a DAC you're using, or maybe it's a testament to something the Atom speakers do differently than what Pitt and Giblin do. I don't know. I'm just relaying the information that because the HyPEX module that's built into both speakers converts all incoming signals to digital, runs them through the DSP before converting them back to analog for amplification, putting a DAC that you may have purchased for reasons that, I really like the sound of this DAC or the way that it does this or that, having its secret sauce do the conversion and then analog and adding another layer of conversion after the secret sauce may or may not be a good thing, may or may not be audible. That's all I'm stressing. For the few people that may fit more into my boat, but also there may be people that agree with you. I'm just trying to point out both sides of the argument so as not to make too definitive of a statement about what you should and shouldn't do with respect to digital to analog or analog to digital conversion.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you brought this point up to Pitt and Giblin, didn't they say or question why you use the analog inputs at all?
They didn't question it when I explained why and the added functionality of the Eversolo and the fact that I could use the Apple TV remote because it had an HDMI connection. They were like, "Oh, okay, I get it." But in their opinion, for best performance, connecting a streamer or some type of digital source digitally to the speakers, in their opinion, has yielded the best results. And I did test that. Like I could do optical out of our television directly into the optical input of the Pitt and Giblin and do the speakers that way. The only difference is I had to use their remote instead of the TV remote for volume, and I just didn't like that. So I liked the convenience of having the HDMI and the CEC, and then obviously all the streaming that was built into my personal reference, Eversolo.
Okay. JC Onafray wonders if using active speakers for home theater could be a thing in the future.
It's not only a thing for the future, it's a thing for the present. Most mastering studios where the soundtrack is laid out and mastered and mixed for cinema and home theater use is done using active speakers. Why that hasn't 100% caught on in the consumer realm is beyond me, but it is actually more common in the professional realm than anything. So could it catch on with consumers? Absolutely, it could and should. But to suggest that it's not a thing would be a little bit misleading because it's actually a very big deal in the pro world.
Well, I don't think that's what JC was
Well, I don't know if
suggesting.
maybe JC knew that powered monitors like Atom, like Genelec, like Meyer Sound, like JBL, like ATC, these are all used very often in the mastering of albums and the mastering of movies. So it would actually make sense for those speakers to translate to the consumer realm. And a lot of them do. Don't get me wrong. You can buy Genelecs for your house. You can buy Atom. You can buy ATC for your home. In which case, it stands to reason in theory that you would have a closer facsimile to what the mastering artists heard than anything.
Well, MK agrees with you. And speaking of Genelec, they say it's already done a lot of times, not only in the mixing rooms, as you just said, for Atmos, where you find Genelec, Newman, etc., but also here in the home theater scene where people build active DIY speakers with Hypex amps, for example, and all controlled with a Trinoff, Storm Audio, or something else. Just Soundwise Active will be the future. Way more possibilities and options to get a better sounding product in the end, but most audiophiles will continue buying passive because they think switching amps brings better sound.
True. I mean, one thing I've failed to mention is soundbars are technically active speakers. And smart speakers are active speakers. And so it is catching on. And I completely agree with this commenter that, when done right and in a blind test, I'm willing to bet money that the vast majority of people would pick an active speaker over a comparable or identical passive version of that speaker. There's something to be said for a speaker that is being driven exactly to the speaker's designer's specifications and being able to be tuned using something like DSP, as opposed to having to design a speaker that is kind of all things to all people, but a master of none, which is really what you run into with passive speakers. It's like, well, now you're kind of at the mercy of amplifier pairing, room layout, setup, and all of this but with active speakers, again, if you know what you're doing, or the designer has built in that functionality, like the guys at Pitt and Giblin have, where even remotely from Hobart, they can tune my speakers here in the United States if need be. That's remarkable, and that's something you're just not going to get with passive speakers, at least not without an outlay of a lot of extra cash and other equipment that then enables that level of functionality.
Just to throw this out there for anybody that picks up on every word you say, because we know they do. They are not our speakers.
No.
The Pitt and Giblins are going back to Australia or Tasmania. We're just waiting for the pickup.
Yep.
So just want to, put that out there.
By the time that you see this episode, they very well could be gone. They are disconnected, ready for pickup. We just haven't had the date given to us yet.
Okay, so we're going to move on to a few comparison questions that came in. President Hughes says, looks like the kind of speaker electronic pipe organ manufacturers use. And then President Hughes wants a comparison to the KLIPSCH 7s. And what about the 9s?
Didn't I mention? I mentioned the 7s in the review.
Yeah, well, do it again.
Yeah, no, not comparable at all. Not to say that the 7s or the 9s aren't good speakers. They are for what they are, but no, the level of refinement here with the SUPERWAX, the scale, the recreation of this organic live quality is way more in line with something like a LaScala than a 7. So yeah, if 11-ish grand landed cost in the US is a hard pill to swallow, and don't fault anyone if it is, then yeah, you can have a ton of fun with the 7s or the 9s, but these are not comparable products in any way, shape, or form.
I preferred the 7s over the 9s.
Me too.
If you want to go back and watch that review, we talk a lot about the differences between the two. I mean, I think you get a lot of value out of the KLIPSCH,
100%.
no doubt.
100%.
But there is no comparison.
Yeah.
There really isn't.
Yeah.
Joseph Pizzolato.
Okay.
I would have liked to have seen you comment more on the Heresy comparison. The look is similar, and perhaps price point with superior electronics could, in fact, rival this.
No.
Yeah, I'm going to say no way, Jose.
No way, no how.
The Heresy is a fantastic speaker.
Love it.
We still have ours.
Yep.
We do not have the opportunity to listen to it very often. But it's just, maybe the looks are reminiscent to a degree, but that's where it ends. The Pitt and Giblin, they are so much more refined.
Yep.
Now the Heresy will give you a more vintagey type of a sound, I think, if that's something you like.
Yeah.
But the Pitt and Giblins are far more controlled. They have way better bass. I mean, the finish.
Yeah.
And you just can't. There's no comparison.
Yeah.
And I think you put a great electronics with the Heresy, it will improve their sound.
Sure.
But you aren't gonna be able to get there even with that.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I mean, I would have to do Heresies with something along the lines of, let's call it the 600.2 or maybe Marantz's new Model 10 amplifier. But before we even get to that point, I'm also injecting my mini DSP SHD. I'm putting in a subwoofer, and I am tuning and tweaking to the nth degree to get somewhere in the ballpark, but still not matching. Because there's certain things that you can't overcome with the Heresy. And that is, like you said, there's a refinement, and there's part of that refinement, and it's immediate. And I can say this from having the more expensive Cornwalls next to the SUPERWAX minis. The enclosure of the SUPERWAX is far more inert. It's far thicker, better constructed, and feels and sounds less hollow. So yes, you are going to sacrifice maybe some of that natural organic bloom with certain instruments that KLIPSCH Heritage speakers can be very, very good at recreating. That little extra body of a grand piano with the top fully up and all that air and a little bit of resonance, the Cornwalls nail that. Whereas, let's say Beethoven Blues from John Batiste through the SUPERWAX Mini, it's that same piano, but the top is a little bit closed. So the bloom is just dampened a little bit. But as a result, you pick up on more of the nuances. You can hear the shifts in the damper pedal. You can hear his nails on the keys. These are little things that are a little bit more glossed over, even with supreme electronics on the Cornwalls, purely due to differences in how the cabinets are constructed. When it comes to the Heresy, that's amplified even more. The Heresies are a far more lively, far more, I guess, resonant cabinet. And it creates a sound, and that sound is very cool, but it's not the same.
Okay, we have one more KLIPSCH speaker comparison question from Bernard Munt.
Okay.
How would they compare to the Forte 4s?
Very similar to the Cornwalls in a lot of ways, because the Forte 4s, mid-range and tweeter are the same as the Cornwall 4. So it really comes down to the bass. Now, because the Forte 4 is not ported, the Forte 4 can sound a little more dampened and a little bit more controlled at times or in places compared to even something like the Cornwall 4, in which case it may be possible to create a, please don't get mad at me, but a more poor man's sensation or version of the Pitt Giblin SUPERWAX Mini using the Forte 4s rather than the Cornwall 4s, but you're still really, you're not going to equal the bass unless you use a sub and dial it in perfectly.
Really?
And
You think so?
on the Forte 4s?
I mean, I felt like they had a lot of bass,
The Fortes do have bass, but here, go ahead.
but they needed a solid amplifier to control them.
Absolutely 100% true. But the SUPERWAX Minis in our room played down to damn near right at 20 hertz before roll off even set in. And that's something the Forte 4s just can't do. They don't go that low. They go low enough that you'll have the feeling that you'll believe that they do. But like we talked about in our SVS SB17 review, there are some bass notes that aren't so much about what you're hearing as what you feel. And that concussive wave of energy can add that little extra bit of contrast to notes. And it can actually, in an inaudible sense, lend a sensation of body or scale to even a space or a recording, because it's down there, it's in the mix. And the SUPERWAX Mini can hit those notes. The Forte 4 pulls up just a little bit short, and it matters.
I will say, I think that obviously your measurements, I think, showed this in your review of the Pitt Giblin, that they are a much more neutral speaker than the KLIPSCH.
Any of the KLIPSCHs.
Than any of the
From
KLIPSCH.
100 hertz to 20 kilohertz, there's no KLIPSCH. None. And I'm not saying this to say that KLIPSCH are crap, because I love them. But I've never, like I said, I've never seen a horn-like wave-guided speaker or a horn speaker do what the Pitt Giblins do from 100 hertz on up through the treble. It is, dare I say, bordering on KEF level, what's that other brand? Per listen level, like neutrality. It's just straight line. And I zoomed into my graph on this one a little bit more than I have in the past. Some of you guys have made comments about my graphs being too zoomed out. So what's really important to note is the yellow box, the plus and minus, how 99% from 100 hertz to 20 kilohertz is all within that yellowed window. That's linear AF. Had I zoomed out more, that would have looked like a straight line. And that's insane for a speaker that, let's face it, when you guys look at it, a lot of people made snap judgments. This speaker is insanely good.
I will say that the Pitt Giblins are very intelligent speakers. So if you struggle with intelligibility, when you're watching shows or whatnot, we did use these a lot for watching TV shows and movies, and I never really struggled with the Pitt Giblins unless it was, a heavily accented
dialect,
from an actor or whatever. But really great on that front.
Yeah. I would only say that the big difference between them and maybe something insane like a BioLab 90 or whatever is the size of the center image. And this is maybe something that a lot of people would prefer over something a little bit more technically accurate in terms of scale and placement is, yes, intelligibility, high. But when watching a show like The Pit on HBO Max, the vocals, the dialogue coming from, say, Noah Wiley, it was larger in kind of its width and scale compared to maybe how he appeared on screen. Whereas with other active speakers, I'm going to speak to Bang & Olufsen specifically, like it feels one-to-one, through those speakers. To each their own. You may prefer the slightly broader but still focused and intelligible sound of the SUPERWAX Mini. It's just something I need to point out.
Moving on to Kef, Chol Wu wants to comment about the LS60. They say your point with the LS60 is much appreciated. It is rather surprising that that speaker isn't more popular. Does it have any issues like noise, or is it, in your view, mostly that the audiophiles not bothering with active speakers? Most people don't seem to mind using Dirac, which of course converts everything to digital first. So what's the holdup?
Couldn't tell you, but I think the LS60 is popular. But I think the reason why people aren't clamoring to get that over, say, whatever new tower speaker of the month comes out from any half dozen brands, once a year, everything to do with audiophiles want to play with gear. They want to tinker. They want to play with toys, and that's fine. That's fine, but that doesn't take anything away from the LS60 or any powered speaker like the SUPERWAX Mini. To each their own. There's multiple ways to attack enjoying your favorite music or movies. These are just options in a sea of options, but the LS60 likely isn't in everyone's system at its price, because at the end of the day, it does keep an audiophile or an enthusiast from playing with an amplifier or a different DAC or.
Andre Z has a question about the KLIPSCH Concept 50.
Okay.
Is the SUPERWAX Mini better than the 50?
You want to answer it?
Yeah, it is. It is better.
It is better.
And I love the Concept 50 from KLIPSCH.
Yep.
It is one of my favorite speakers.
Yeah.
Much like the Heresy. We don't get to listen to it as often as I would sometimes like.
Yeah.
But yes, the Mini SUPERWAX, whatever. It just does things that the KLIPSCH can't do.
Yeah.
Not to take away anything from the Concept 50. I mean, I just don't think that that's what that speaker was built for. Like,
no.
It's built to a certain budget.
Yeah.
And they wanted it to sound a certain way, and they accomplished that. And a lot of people love that speaker.
Yeah.
And they should. It's great. But yeah, no, it doesn't come close.
No.
Doesn't come close. Now, this next question or comment I thought was really important.
Okay.
Francis acknowledges a very reasonable concern regarding the idea of spending money with a less established brand.
Okay.
They say, beautiful product. No question. However, for what I can see, they're a fairly new company, and at that price, someone has to wonder about customer service and the possibility of going under, in which case $11,000 could be a high risk. And in addition, the remote is too cheap looking. Okay. I think anyone willing and capable of spending $11,000 can also squeeze extra cash for a more traditional system with well-established and known names, and that would be my preference. So I'd like to respond to Francis's comment. As for the remote, obviously the team behind Pitt and Giblin has good taste. Their speakers are beautifully designed. They sound,
all of their speakers.
Right.
Yeah.
They sound incredible.
Yeah.
Which for me makes the decision to use an off-the-shelf remote all the more surprising.
Yeah.
Because when you are wading into a market that has this kind of price point, not considering every single aspect of the owner's experience is going to put you at a disadvantage.
Yes.
Everything from the unboxing to the end user experience needs to be exceptional at this price.
Yep.
Because most people who spend this kind of money not only expect, but deserve a high-level experience.
Yes.
Those who are truly willing to consider your product, those are the people that you have to win over.
Yeah.
And it's best not to give them any reason to look elsewhere.
Completely agree. Completely agree. Can I offer a couple of counterpoints?
Sure.
Okay. It is a valid concern when dealing with a small bespoke or indie brand. I get it. However, the flip side to that coin is because there may not be hundreds of thousands of customers, but maybe just hundreds of customers, the company's ability to provide better customer service on a one-to-one case may actually be higher than if you were to go with a more corporate-run, larger company. And I say this because anecdotally, I've actually heard, not only from Pitt and Giblin themselves, but from other Pitt and Giblin customers through Instagram, that Ross especially, who's one of the founders, he interacts with customers one-to-one all the time. He personally has tuned customer systems himself remotely just because he wants to ensure that, they get the performance that he knows the speakers are capable of. In fact, Ross actually took some umbrage with me for being a little bit more hands-off and not allowing them as a company to be more involved in making sure every aspect of the speaker's performance was 100% perfect all of the time, and to his credit. And I, at first, when he and I had this discussion, I was a bit, I don't want to say taken aback, but I was a bit like, I don't think he understands the reviewer, whatever relationship. But in thinking about it after the fact, I'm kind of like, well, I'm always trying to recreate the customer experience. And when you're dealing with a larger company, a corporation, a brand that's been around for 20 or 30 years, Samsung, Marantz, you name it. If you have a problem, good luck. Yeah, you can write tech support. You may get an email. You may get a call in a couple of days. Who knows? But you may not get anything. And so a lot of times, if I run into little problems like that, where something is clearly not broken about a product, but there's something about it that I feel that customers are going to face, I try and problem solve it myself. And because that's born out of decades of reviewing products where I know as a reviewer, I can get preferential treatment from the brands, pick up the phone, be like, hey, whatever, and they'll do whatever I want. But that's not what you, the end user, are going to have. And so I keep brands at arm's length. But I get it, because these are small batch, call it one-off speakers built to order, where you have control over, hey, do you want the copper to be a different finish? Do you want the front baffle to be a different finish? Do you want the wood to be a different finish? Do you want this speaker to be designed to be hung rather than on the floor? These are all things that they will do when you order. And because of that, you have a greater opportunity for that one-to-one relationship. That's not special to reviewers like myself. That is something that your investment affords you. I want to make that clear. All that being said, as for what the future holds, if a brand is going to be around 10 years from now or not, none of us have crystal balls. And while you could make the argument that it's easier for a small indie brand to go under, I could make the argument that there are brands that we all thought were too big to fail that are failing right before our very eyes. And there may be a world, I'm speaking in hypotheticals, but there may be a world where a Pitt and Giblin is still in existence, but a KLIPSCH is not. Let that sink in.
I totally agree. I mean, I think in this climate, especially,
Yeah.
Economically and politically, I mean, you really don't know
What's going to
happen.
Yeah.
And like you said, a large company, a large corporation has just as much at stake, if not more, than the little companies. So I can totally understand someone's concern, like Francis here, about spending that much money with a lesser known quantity or entity. But you make a good point. You could easily buy a Marantz product tomorrow, when a month from now, are they even open? I mean, that's a lot of those are unknowns.
Yeah.
That are going to be in this hobby in every facet of retail. I think for a while. So it's worth considering. But I mean, I do agree that they with you as far as Pitt Giblin. They do offer a deeper level of customer service that you're unlikely to get from someone else. And that's something that will likely appeal to a lot of people. But you know what? You are going to pay for that
Yeah.
type of interaction.
Yeah.
And so you as the customer have to determine where value really exists for you,
Yeah.
and just to be clear, in case anyone's not sure how I truly feel about the Pitt Giblin, I really did enjoy them.
Yeah.
They sound fantastic.
Yeah.
And they're beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish we could keep them.
Yeah.
I really do. I really do.
It is something that you have said to me on 2 or 3 separate occasions.
That's true. Okay. My allergies are starting to overwhelm me, so I think we could just go ahead and end it.
All right. I think this has been a great first show back.
Hey, yeah.
First show back in over 2 months. This was fun. This was fun. I miss working with you.
Oh.
I miss working with you, so I'm so glad to have you back.
Oh.
So,
I'm just going to take it one day at a time.
as you should. This was a surprise. I hope it was a nice surprise for all of you. She let me know the day before that we were going to do this, so I was pumped. So this has been fun, nice change of pace for me. Hopefully a nice change of pace for you guys, but it has been great having you back.
Oh, thanks, baby.
So, anything else?
No, I don't think so.
All right. So, guys, tune in Sunday. Yeah, 2 videos, 1 week. Tune in Sunday, brand new video, a lot of fun, very interesting product. But then, until then, enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a great Saturday, and we'll see you Sunday. And take care. Bye.
Bye.